So with that said, we've got a great panel up here, and it's going to be moderated by Joe Cieplinski. Please give him a warm hand.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you everybody for being here. Thank you for being the people here at DubDub who actually care about business, right? I have been doing business for quite a long time, and I've been discussing business on my podcast and in my conference and things of that nature for a long time, because I really feel passionate that Apple can tell us all day long that we have to build great apps and build better iPad apps in order to make better Mac apps and whatever it is that they're pushing yesterday, but none of that means anything if we can't make a living, right, and keep doing it so that we can keep building this great stuff. We've got a great panel here of people who have been in this game for quite a while and have been doing that and succeeding, and I hope we're going to have a really robust kind of conversation today. The topic is subscriptions, but let me just start with a disclaimer here, okay? When we make generalizations about apps, because this happens to me every time I get into a discussion with people about subscriptions, there's always somebody who comes back, but Joe, that doesn't work for my app, or it doesn't work for all apps, okay? I get it, not all apps, okay? Not every app should be a subscription. I don't think anyone here is gonna argue that. But at the same time, I think we have to accept that the market is kind of shifting in different ways and everyone is experimenting with different pricing models. And so if we make a generalization, don't like sit in your seat and stew and say like, I totally disagree. Try to open your mind a little bit to the different viewpoints we're gonna have today, and I think we can all learn something that way. So, with that out of the way, what I'd like to do is have our whole panel here introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what they do so that you can understand their perspective and why they're here. So briefly, if you can just go down the row.
Hi, my name is Marc Edwards. I run a company called Bajango. We've got a product called iStat Menus. We were on the App Store, the iOS App Store from pretty much day one. As soon as we could. There's a bit of a delay being in Australia getting an account. We're generally focused on kind of pro apps, pro niche apps and tooling. We're building a big design tool that we've been working on for about 8 years now. And we've kind of experimented with a whole bunch of different stuff, including subscriptions, so I think it's going to be a good conversation today. I'm probably going to be maybe the most against subscriptions on the panel. Maybe. That's going to be good fun.
I'm agnostic. I'm Harrison, co-founder and chief customer officer at Paddle. We are a platform through which software businesses both run and grow their business. We work with Django, MacPaw, and hopefully Ulysses and Riedel pretty soon. No pressure. We work with a ton of Mac software companies. By run, we help them with things like trials, licensing, payments, and billing. And then the grow piece is actually talking to some of these sellers about business models, pricing strategy, and giving them the best practice advice in order for them to grow their revenues. So we've seen lots of different things, and hopefully can share some of that and not influence you or you guys on what to do or what not to do.
Hi, I'm Seelmann from Ulysses. It's turning 16 this summer, so Ulysses has been around for a very long time, since the dark days, at least. Yeah, and we recently, like 2 years ago, switched to subscription. That made some buzz. It was sort of intended to make some buzz. It made more buzz than we had wanted, but yeah. And it's been a paid app before, and now it's subscription. And I'm very happy that we did a switch and would never go back. I have a very strong pro position for subscriptions. So there needs to be some conflict to make a good discussion. Yeah, right. So.
Hi everyone, my name is Oleksandr Kosovan. I'm the founder of MacPaw, which is a developer behind apps like ClimaMac, Gemini, and now SetApp. We've been in the business for about 11 years already, and we tried a lot of business models, starting from perpetual licenses, upgrades, in-app purchases, and now subscription. Recently, we also launched a subscription-based app store, even for the Mac platform. So we tried everything. We tried to build a successful business from it, and we have very good experience.
They are very successful, by the way. Good morning, guys. My name is Dennis from Riedel. We've been on the App Store since day one. I can't believe it's been 10 years. So we launched our first app, Riedel Docs, on day one in July 2008. Since then, we focused on building great productivity apps. You probably know Spark, Scanner Pro, Documents, PDF Expert. And we've built quite a successful independent business on that, grew to 160 people, and now trying to reinvent email, Spark, and that's why we're trying subscriptions. not the iOS ones. We're trying to do is like external processing, so that's interesting. And now we're switching our PDF, we're trying to switch and see the reaction of PDF Expert being switched to subscription. So a lot of interesting insights, and I think we'd love to make this more interactive and hear your questions to make this interesting and more collaborative experience and just share thoughts. But I'll let Joe moderate that. I want to moderate this as well.
He's doing moderation, yeah.
Yes, thank you. So software is this weird product, right? It doesn't really, if you think about the history of selling things for money, on the one hand, it's not a toaster, right? You don't buy it and then take it home and then make as much toast as you want. And usually you'd think, well, for at least 90 days or a year or whatever, it's guaranteed. And if something breaks, I can take it back. But I just bought the toaster and I can keep making toast indefinitely until the thing breaks and then I gotta go to another toaster, right? It doesn't quite work that way for software because things change, right? Apple updates their operating system, and now suddenly I have to change your toaster in order to make it keep working, right? Nobody, when you paint your living room, the toaster doesn't stop working, but that's exactly what happens in software. So it doesn't really make sense to put it in a box and sell it, although we tried to do that for many years, right? On the other hand, and this is something I've had to, as someone who's very pro-subscription, I've had to come to grips with as I talk to smart people who've kind of let me see the other side. It's not really a service either in the traditional sense. When I hire a plumber, I understand I have to keep hiring the plumber. I have to, I'm not going to pay the plumber once and then they'll come and fix my sink every week. And so, software, I can make, it doesn't matter if you use my software or if this entire room or the entire world uses my software, it costs me the same. I mean, yes, there's a little bit of maintenance and other things, but those are minimal costs compared to, another copy of the software doesn't cost me anything. And so on the other hand, it doesn't really make much sense to sell it as a subscription either. And I think that's where the struggle comes from. And I'd love to get your thoughts on the idea of why is this such a hard thing for people to discuss without getting emotional and angry? Is there a way for us to move forward and say, is there a perfect business model, A? And if there isn't, then can we accept that different types of software needs to be sold differently? Anybody?
Yeah. I mean, I think you've said it, that there is no perfect business model. And I also think there's a massive difference. There's certain software that just, you honestly do buy it, and it is all running locally on the device, and maybe it doesn't even need that much maintenance. And so it kind of is like a toaster. There is software that is like a toaster. But there's obviously other software where we're working on a weather app right now, and we have hard costs for the data. So the more someone uses the app, the more it costs us. And generally we've kind of stayed away from subscriptions, but for that product, there is no other choice because we would lose money the more people use the app if we weren't a subscription. So, yeah.
Well, I would also say that a big difference is in motivation of the developer, how to support products. Like when you sell a license, most of the teams will be focusing on the first conversion steps. We need to sell, we need to upgrade, and that's it. But when it comes to a subscription, there is a different motivation, to keep customers and to make them happy for as long as possible. And this is like a long-term relationship building. And you are focusing your team on a completely different goals then. And this actual benefit for the customers.
Okay, I think maybe unpopular opinion, customers don't care about developers. Everybody cares what's for me. And if I can get something for free, I don't want to pay, right? Because I've been making some Excel spreadsheet, trying to calculate all the subscriptions we have in our lives, like the HBOs and Netflixes and Wall Street Journal, and Apple has 5 now: iCloud, TV Plus, Music, Arcade, and a few else. So we'll end up with 50 or 60, and people don't care about oh yeah, I will think that these developers will have to grow and will support. They don't care. So for me, it's very simple. If you provide recurring value to people, if they're happy to pay, because people are okay with paying for things that they like and they use. We're all okay paying. If we like something, we'll pay for it. So the way we look at this, if this service is your app or service or software creates value where, let's say, people do their job there, for example, Photoshop or Sketch, right? You work there, you pay for it. That's how you make money. So it makes sense for me to pay for this. And if something I can use for free, I'll be using it for free. So we learned the hard way with Spark, because we thought, we'll give everything so much for free, And one day, people will feel like, yeah, I really love Spark. I want to pay. I want to support these guys. No, didn't happen. Well,
Yeah, I would also want to emphasize the relationship between the user of a software and the developer, because I mean every app is different and there's casual apps, but if you're in the market of a professional app, then professionals usually want their tool to stay around. So they bring a lot of effort into getting that tool working for them, and once they have it, they don't want to like switch every other month or something because the developer went bankrupt. So we have a lot of people approaching us and saying, thank you for finally going subscription. I can finally rely on you being around in a few years. So I would say the more you're in the pro market, the more accepted and even wanted is a subscription model, because people want to rely on the developer having a good business, because if there's no good business for the developer, then their tool of choice would maybe die, and that is what they don't want at all. So,
yeah, I think I agree with those points. I think that the real trick is, and this is kind of linked to what you're saying as well, Dennis, I think is the real kind of secret sauce is aligning the way in which you're billing with the value you're delivering the customers as well. And if they're seeing value out of their product and they're paying in such a way that they see is associated with that, for example, for like a product that does storage, if you're paying based on the amount of storage is that you're using, people understand that, they understand the costs associated with it, to your point, and they're also seeing value out of the product and it's sticking, they don't want it to go away, sorry. So if you can align how it is you're billing with the value you're actually delivering, that's when everything will go fine and there won't be big buzz and uproar and things, I guess.
No, it's great, and I absolutely agree with all that. That's good points. So switching off a little bit, the other day, Max and I were chatting a little bit about his app, Ulysses, which made a transition into, and again, this is one of those things where if you're building a new app, you have the ability to create a business model on day one and decide that's the thing it's going to be. But if you've had an app existing in the store, which I think everyone in here has done the paid upfront model at some point. I don't know if Paddle was ever that, I mean, it's a service, it's kind of different, yeah. But you know, the subscriptions themselves aren't new. The app, you know, Microsoft was selling subscriptions to businesses for a long time, and to the points here, like businesses kind of understand subscription, whereas consumers, it's a new thing for them, at least in their heads. They're used to, frankly, I mean, Dennis is right. They're used to downloading everything they want for free, and if your app has a price associated with it, and the one next to it is free, they're just going to go for the free one most of the time. So my question then is about this transition. If you've made the choice, or you've got an existing app that's been around for a while, and then you're suddenly deciding, this isn't sustainable. It's not working out. I can't charge upgrades because Apple's never going to give me that. So what can I do? And I want to make this move into subscription. What would your advice be as some folks who have done that and made that transition? Would anybody got thoughts on?
I've got some discussion on that. I mean, we haven't made that transition, but we've gone from free to paid, and we've done a whole bunch of stuff. Basically, people hate it when you change your model, and they hate it when you change your price. They hate it when you raise your price, even if they've already bought it. They'll hate it if you lower your price, even if they've already bought it. Basically, I think people like it when the deal is very clear, very simple. And I think if you are going to use a subscription, you think that's the right way to go, I would actually do it from day one, be very clear about it, because people hate when you change things. Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen quite a lot of our sellers go through that transition, I guess, and I think the people who've done this best are very clear in what it is that they're doing, as you say. But again, I think linked to some of the points we were discussing earlier, it's talking to your user about why you're doing this, which is kind of the reason from a developer perspective why it makes sense, but then also how this is going to benefit them and what extra value that's going to deliver them and what it's going to allow you to do. And if it's spun in a positive light for your buyer, they're going to be okay with it, or more okay with the change, I guess. But that's not necessarily easy to do.
So one thing I realized in the aftermath of the switch is that we sort of made a conscious decision what our customers should be. So when you build an app, you usually just start working on it, and then you put it up for sale. And some people buy it, and you get feedback. And you get mostly, probably, like for me it was that way, an untargeted crowd of customers that they're just there, they're sending feedback. And when we switched subscription, in the aftermath, I realized we chose the pro users of our app to be our desired customers, and we cut off all the casual users. We had a lot of users that shut it, got the app during a Christmas discount, or just bought it once to write a note and realized, yeah, maybe I can keep it around and use it from time to time. And we cut off those people, and there's nothing we could do about it. It's like, well, we're doing subscription. It's for pro users mostly. If you're willing to pay, of course, you can do it as a non-pro user, but it's targeted towards pro user. And if you're not a pro user of my app, then we're no longer doing business. So that is that's a hard cut. That's what we did. That's why there was so much rambling about it, I guess. But in the end, I mean, we still get 1-star reviews every single day about that, just that switch. But in the end, for us and for the customers that we have and that use the app the most, it was the best decision, because those users that draw most value from the app are now our target users, and we don't have like that big of a range of different usages. Yeah.
Did your revenue go up? Yeah. Did your revenue go up?
The revenue is growing rapidly, whereas before it was sort of random steadily. 30-40% a year. So.
Would you consider a different billing model for individuals versus, say, teams using the product, for example, or like businesses using the product? We see that quite a lot in different billing models for different types of buyer. I guess you're still having to build for both, which is something it doesn't sound like you wanted to do.
I'm so convinced of subscription now, I just would do subscription for everybody, even for teams. Like, they would get a special price probably. We're not there yet, but we want to go there someday. But yeah, it would also be subscription. Especially, I mean, businesses, it's a business expense. So you're not buying cars, you're leasing cars, because that's the best way to expense it. So subscriptions is a natural choice for businesses.
I also wanted to add, like, we moved to a subscription a year ago with our main product, ClimaMac, and it was like 10 years on the market previously, so it had already a huge user base. And of course, this transition was a very sensitive problem. So we approached it a bit different way. We tested like half a year before transition to the subscription on a very small audience, and tried different pricing models, different messaging approaches before we found like the perfect match, like of pricing, of term, etc. And that.
Can you give us examples of what pricing was the messaging, what's perfect, like what worked?
So what we are focusing on, first of all, the customer feedbacks. We didn't want to have any angry customers, and this is really important for us. And second, revenue. And in terms of revenue, our goal was, of course, to increase revenue, still transition into a subscription. And for us, like previously, like release cycles was about like once per 3 years. So every 3 years, we will release a major upgrade, and then we will make money from existing customers. Right now, we moved to a yearly cycle, which basically tripled our revenue speed. And this was actually a very good transition for the business. And in terms of pricing, like we picked, the subscription pricing is the same like a yearly license before, but we also allowed customers to purchase a perpetual license, which is much more expensive. So for customers who complain, I want to own the product, we still have this option for a while.
Did you increase the price for the one purchase?
Yeah, and we also tested this, like for how much we can increase the price, what is the average lifetime value for the customer, so it should match these numbers. So I would say that transition went really smooth for us. So we didn't have a lot of complaints, although like it was millions of customers. We expected like huge volume of customer support requests, but it went very smoothly.
We didn't have the opportunity to do it that way because we were on the App Store, and so the possibilities are a bit more limited, I would say. But I think that's the right approach if you don't want like the big mess.
Well, actually, with an App Store, you can also test on 7 markets. Like, for example, pick Australia, for example, English-speaking country, very good audience. This is what we've done for the Gemini. Again, when we launched it, we made a soft launch only for 1 country, and we tested all the business models, advertisement there, and then we made a big launch on other.
you guys, if I remember, were also looking at the conversion rate drop on like your landing page for pricing if you added in it was a subscription, right? And then tried to model, okay, is the retention of these customers on a subscription going to allow us to make more money over time based on the drop in conversion? You kind of have to do those maths. We see some people do this really badly. So some people who are considering subscriptions have been previously selling their product for, $50 or whatever, and they come to us and say, oh, we want to start selling our product on a monthly basis for $2. And you kind of say, well, your cost of sales is going to increase because you're going to be charged a fee more frequently for those sales. And also you're going to have to retain those customers for a really, really long time for you to actually make more money. And is this the right approach for you? And like you do need to associate this with both value and customer feedback, but also do your maths to make sure this is going to work because, yeah, you need to make money.
Yeah, math is hard, but it is important to get those things down. Understand what's going on in the mind of your customer. And again, to get back to this business versus consumer thing, it really depends on what your app's audience is. Because I can tell you, I've been a middle manager, and I remember when Adobe went subscription. And when everyone else was screaming about it, I was celebrating because I led a team of 3 or 4 people that needed the Creative Suite. And every year, I had to go into my boss's office and say, all right, we need another $1,400 per person to go get this upgrade. And what he made me do is go back home, and now I have to go write up a justification. Why are we spending this money? What new features are we going to be using? What is the cost-benefit analysis of having this new version versus the old version? And I hated doing that every year. As soon as the subscription happened, I just said, hey, look, $50 a month for the rest of our lives. Is that okay? Yep. And that was approved once, and from that point forward, I never had to have that conversation with my boss. Businesses love subscriptions. They love predictable costs that come at an interval that their accountants can predict, right? And that's a beautiful thing. And so if you can target pro users, you can target those kinds of people, you're in luck. Like subscriptions are going to be an easier path for you. But I do think with things like consumer products, people are still coming around to that mindset, and it's still a difficult transition for folks. I did have a question from someone in the audience, and in the spirit of what Dennis had said about making this interactive, I would like to get that. So I'm going to bring the mic to you.
What I was wanting to know from you guys, seeing that you've been in the biz for a while, what was your initial approach in terms of presenting your application to the user? Did you go out and field market it, or did you just say, I'm going to put it out there and see what happens?
Anybody?
Of course, at the business, we want to make a successful business from apps. Expecting that we will be featured by Apple or we will be featured by some major article or blog post, it's very hard to rely business on that. So from day one, we were trying to build a successful business model, and this means that customer acquisition costs should be lower than the LTV. And in the subscription business, you have to think a bit more long term, like a few years ahead. If you have a good retention, if you have very high LTV, you can afford better customer acquisitions and more channels to acquire new customers. And it's very tricky business to make it work.
I guess your question was about marketing, right? Defining who is your customer and how to go to market. So what we do, we're trying to find common problems that people have. Let's say we felt like, okay, when we started working on Spark 5 years ago, the idea was like, okay, everybody hates email. Let's try to solve this. Let's try to make the best email app for everyone. And then we realized that it's not possible to do for everyone. So we focused on our niche audience who are professionals, people like us, who had a lot of email. So this is our customer. Like Max said, understand who is your customer. So what we're trying to do is understand what problems do people have. So I flew in from Ukraine here, and I sat down, did 75 interviews, 1 hour each, with people at the conference 5 years ago, trying to ask questions. What is your problem with email? How can we solve that? Does this work? How do you communicate? So trying to define the product. And then, we were lucky to be in this space for 10 years, for 11 years. So we had some customers in the past, but we've made this product so vibrant that people just loved it, and the press loved it. And so we launched this, and we've had a lot of users on day one.
So what did you do in terms of once you spoke with them?
Yeah.
Did you go to them and say, hey, look, what do you think of this work?
Yeah, we did beta. We involved them. We involved those people, and we did a beta version, and kind of we did this involvement in development. I mean, we're quite good at the design and product. So and then we did the product and launched it using all our channels.
So you didn't ask them what they thought in terms of what the worth of the app would be?
We did. That's why we run beta with thousands of people. And before we launch something, like Alex said, they A/B test and like talk to users and see what they feel. That's very important. Who's the user?
Right.
But I think that's marketing. I'm happy to talk afterwards because we've been doing this for I think we have conversation about subscriptions. And I'm happy to talk about this later on.
Okay, cool.
I just wanted to add, like, the first step is to have a great product, but then you have to think how to scale, and this is like the main question when you want to have when you're making a business.
Yeah, it is important. I think a lot of people think that the great product, they forget sometimes they have to build a great product. And on the other end of it, some people think that's all they have to do. And this is a really complicated thing. And again, these questions about subscriptions or what your business model is going to be are critical. And you really have to have these discussions. I love the idea of getting this kind of market research in there, because I do think a lot of us think that everyone who uses our products think like we do. And they really don't. So what I learned the more I talk to customers is that people have different viewpoints on all these things, and so you can't make too many assumptions. You build something you think you'll like, but you also want to build what your actual target audience likes. Any other questions while we're here? Yeah. Thank you.
I forget which one of you said, it might have been Marc, that people hate change. It seems to me like the audience or all of the users went through this phase of where everybody was just angry all the time about all the subscription stuff, but it seems like that's rolling off to me. I mean, when I first saw SetApp, I was like, wow, I'm not going to pay a subscription, that's ridiculous. And then I looked in there and all the apps I already loved were in there, like the stuff you guys make, like iStat menus, and so I stopped paying for it, but then later on I just came back. And so it feels like now it's okay. It's not a big deal. I mean, again, change if you're already paid for, but have you guys experienced that? People are less angry now?
Well, we haven't gone to subscription for iStat menus, but from my point of view, I think if we really want people to like us, and I know it sounds kind of weird, but we're not optimizing for revenue or whatever else, because this is something I want to be doing until I retire. So. And we want the company to keep going for a long time. So obviously, you have to be doing well enough that you can eat and pay the rent. I get that. And in certain circumstances, then that if subscription's the only choice, then sure, that's what you have to do. But from our point of view, if someone's paying us every couple of years and we provide new features and we have to prove ourselves, that seems really quite similar to us, except there's no commitment. It's not like they're signing up forever. So from our point of view, financially, it's very similar. A subscription or not really doesn't matter. And obviously, being off the Mac App Store for iStat menus, it's easier. But yeah, in terms of change, I think I think there is certainly some fatigue, and certain types of products, certainly pro products, can easily have subscriptions because it is easy to justify. But I think I'm certainly personally very cautious about what I sign up for, because it feels like a deal indefinitely unless you actually go in and cancel it. And certain things like the Adobe subscriptions are very difficult to cancel. You have to fight so hard. Apple makes it a lot easier, and most good apps make it quite easy because they know they're better off for making it easy. So
the acceptance of subscriptions has definitely massively changed. So when we did the switch, Ulysses went free with in-app subscriptions, so everybody could just leave a review. And we started out with like 2.1 stars average rating, and we're now back up to 4.7. So that's where we were before, 2 years later. So that has definitely gone back. We still get those reviews, but it's the minority now. We just get a lot of reviews, and there's one star every day. Yeah, and one thing we recently did, we switched away from a custom trial to the Apple trial, because we had a custom trial, so you could just start a trial and use it, and afterwards nothing would happen. And we were getting an email every single day by a person that asked, "How do I cancel my trial?" because they didn't understand that the trial they signed up for in our app wasn't the Apple trial, so they probably were bothered. They were like looking for the subscription in the subscription screen, didn't find it, and were bothered enough to send us an email. So that is really like a lot of hoops you have to go through to actually send an email, how do I cancel my trial that I don't see? The expectation has definitely changed. So users come to expect subscriptions. And I myself realize whenever there's a paid app, I'm like, oh, damn, I have to buy it. And then in 2 years, there will be a paid upgrade. Why can't I just subscribe it and keep the same app around forever? Because if there's a paid update, I need to delete the old version and install the new version and all kind of things. So I'm very lazy person, and subscription is also something where you can be very lazy about, yeah.
Yes, so the answer is yes, it has changed. We launched PDF Office back in the day, 2014. It was too early, and people hated it. It just didn't work. I mean, it was amazing software, unique technology, and people just didn't like it. Like, oh, I will not rent your software. I'm ready to pay $70, $80 because that's more a professional side software, and they hated it. And our ratings were low. But now Apple is doing really big educational job on subscriptions. So Apple focuses on subscriptions themselves, and they push this to developers, and they communicate this to developers, and they communicate this to the users. So overall, it has changed. People are more receptive to it. But I think there is, at some point, there's this like fatigue, like another one. I'm done. Like that's too much, right? Or it has to have so much value, like, oh yeah, sure. Why not? I love it.
Well, I also think that a big negative flow depends on the customer experience that Apple offered, like with this free subscription trials that customers try the apps and then get automatically charged. And this is what people hate the most because, well, I didn't want that. They charged me. Here is your 1 star. And I believe that Apple is gonna make some changes into this mechanism pretty soon, and it will make subscription and perceptions more positive.
Yeah, speaking of this, so the problem with subscription is that Apple made it so like when you subscribe, in a lot of apps, a lot of developers who are not very, who don't have very strong principles in their lives, they would just trick people into clicking this continue button and a little tiny text that says, you will be charged $3.99 per week for a scanner app, for example. And then people would be angry, like I press continue, and they would not read text, and they will start using the app, or like they use it once, and then every week they will be charged $3.99 for a scanner app. So, and that creates this, of course, and there are a lot of those developers like that, hundreds of them, tricking users. And there was a few big articles 3 months ago, like TechCrunch, I think did a reporting, New York Times, and a few others, which kind of told this story. And this created this unsafe environment for users, and there was this backlash. So what these articles and this press wave made Apple focus on this experience, so they updated their guidelines so that they tell every developer, you have to, in plain English, and on that button, you have to tell them how much are you charging, like, and for which period. So now it became much more obvious. And Apple really changed that, and like these guidelines help, even though they didn't do that for their own apps, so that's a different topic. But even for us right now, we're launching PDF Expert, doing soft launch, trying to go this very affordable subscription for professionals in a few markets. And it's still getting some A/B tests. And after third version, because we had the version already like in the App Store, people were using it. And then after third submission, Apple review team said, hey guys, we think it should be one-time purchase. And they didn't let us, like, they rejected our build. And now we have a conversation with them why this has to be subscription. And I think it's a good thing, because this prevents all those developers who don't provide a lot of value tricking customers. And that's healthy for the whole environment of the whole App Store. So now I have a call to call Apple this day, tomorrow or today, and then talk to them about this and explain why this has to be subscription. And I think it's great.
Great. So on the subject of Apple, and I really don't want this to become an Apple bashing session, so let's, you guys seem to be like in a good way. What do you think Apple could be doing? Like what in your mind would make this whole thing easier on you as someone who's selling? You want to be in the app stores, Mac App Store and iOS App Store. You also might want to sell it on your own website. Famously Netflix has taken all the subscriptions out. Spotify took the subscriptions from Apple out of their apps and they're able to be on the store. And yet Apple won't let them link to their website to show people how to subscribe, and then Apple argues that that's a better user experience somehow. What do you think Apple could be doing that would make it easier to help with this transition, to help you sustain your business, but at the same time treat your customers fairly? I agree with you that these guidelines are helpful, but I think they could go even further.
Yeah, so obviously you've heard from me about not entirely loving subscriptions, but I think it's really important, and it's very clear that there's a massive difference in what people want and what developers want, and I think it's actually awesome to offer a choice. So our app is on Setup, and it's going really well. Our app is sold via Paddle, and that's going really well, and we're on the Mac App Store, and they're all different for various reasons, and to be honest, people, we've had feedback saying they love it on Setup. We've had feedback people only buy via the web. We've also, before we had the Mac App Store, people would complain constantly that it wasn't on the Mac App Store. If people want to give you money, just let them give you money however they want to do it. Like, it really doesn't matter. So what I'd actually like to see from Apple is just allow more variety of business model. I think right now they've been really, they had a very strong opinion on what they wanted. Like, this is the way you should do it. It's like, you know what, just kind of offer enough stuff in there and just let it work itself out, because it really will. And as long as no one's doing anything dodgy, like the subscriptions, the actual, the buttons to, the guidelines around that have really helped. And I think they really should clamp down on apps that are charging people crazy amounts of money when they don't realize it. But so that, I think those two things, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to echo those points, that the most common times in which we see apps being sold on the App Store already moving over to start selling direct is because they want more flexibility in billing model. I think actually the lines around billing models are going to blur even more so over the coming years, and it's not just going to be your monthly or annual subscription. Maybe you start with an annual subscription, but you have paid add-ons and overage charges and all sorts of crazy stuff that's relevant to your product and how you want to monetize. But right now, the Mac App Store don't really give you the flexibility to do that. Or in the case of a Pro tool like we've been talking about, the most common way in which people are selling those is on a per-seat basis. And if Google come to you and want to pay for 5,000 seats for Ulysses or whatever it may be, the Mac App Store doesn't really facilitate that sale very well in terms of payment methods and actually delivery of the product to those people and seat management and all this type of thing. So there's infrastructure there that people could be better supported with. I'm trying to be very agnostic, but yeah.
I just need to announce that officially our time is up right now, but we have the room for a little while longer. So if you want to continue to listen, I definitely want to hear the rest of these answers. Is everybody okay with that? Yeah, so we're going to go for a little longer, but if you have to leave, we understand. We won't be offended. But so we're going to keep going with this. So go ahead.
Yeah, I forgot.
Well, from Apple revenue reports, we see that services are getting more and more bigger in their revenue chunk. So I believe subscription and why they are pushing every developer to move to a subscription is a big reason for that. But I think the solution could be really easy. It could be, first of all, same rules for every developers, and second, just additional verification. Should this app charge me right now or not? And that's easy. If Apple wanted, they could do it.
Oh, you want to go?
Yeah. So Apple won't change, so there won't be more options. Forget about it. Subscriptions are the only real right business model for Apple, because they are basically selling you devices on subscriptions, and well, they're selling you devices, but you should buy them every year or every other year. And if you have an app that you bought and that you would need to pay an update for, and you would maybe stay on an old OS, so you would stay on an old device, so it's bad for their business. The apps that people use being on subscription is the right match for their own business. So that is why they won't go in other directions now. So what I would want from Apple is actually more help of getting it implemented. I think that's something that's not talked about very much. For us, getting all the transition done and the subscription implemented and then learning from our mistakes and fixing them, we easily spend 1.5 years of engineering on that. So man years, 1.5. It might be different for you. It probably, hopefully is. The possibilities of subscriptions have massively evolved over the last 2 years. So we did the switch 2 years ago, and now there's introductory offers, there's user offers. So they really listen to feedback, and would be massively easier now. But we had a really huge investment to make to get the business into subscription. And before, we didn't have to do that, because you just make your app, you make your best effort at building an app, you put it on the App Store, assign a price, and that's it. You don't have to care about anything. But with the subscription, you are now in charge of running your business, because you have this in-app storefront that you need to run, that you need to implement, localize, test on all devices, and so on and so forth. And that is really quite a lot of work. And I would want for Apple to provide a default solution at least there, so that developers could just adopt, or maybe even push this whole thing out into the App Store itself. So have the subscription purchase even in the App Store itself, so developers don't have to care about all that UI and interaction. There's a lot of complications in there.
So for us, it's quite simple. The ways to improve the pay mechanism. So for Spark, we would love to have more flexibility on seat management. So we did Spark is similar to Slack in a way that we want to charge only those people who are using this as a team, and then it becomes a nightmare. So we're using Stripe, and then we cannot send those people to payment page from the app. So they have to really find and dig how to pay for that. The same Slack does. So having more flexibility on how many people in the team are active, and we want to charge just those people who are active. I think that's very fair to teams. And then having those receipts billed to one company, because it's a business expense for them, Spark for Teams. So that would be great, because right now we're using Stripe, and it's like a third-party option, and we're not going through the App Store payments. And yeah, that would be great.
I just want to say that as a consumer, I personally hate the subscription model, particularly when I come across an app that I might want to use just once, or I might, don't know whether I like it yet or not, and this constant adding subscriptions really kills me. As a developer, I hate the subscription model because Apple's cut on it is so stiff. It's worse than organized crime. I mean, I absolutely, organized crime is cheaper. They would, when I grew up, there was like 10% for protection, right? And Apple's like, no, I want a 30% cut. I'm just going to plug another talk. There's a talk later for the developers here, you guys too. Wednesday afternoon, there's a talk on alternative business model about pay-as-you-go. This fellow here, go to it. You guys need to hear it.
That sounds very interesting. Yeah, definitely. To your point, yeah, I mean, they did make the change to go to 15% after that first year, and that is a concession by Apple. Whether or not they'll ever drop that rate lower, like 15% or whatever, people like to throw numbers out. I don't know what the right number is, but I definitely understand the frustration. To the point that Max made earlier, you're not my customer then at that point, right? And that's okay, and I accept that.
That's the lawsuit that's coming in right now.
Oh yeah, the people are suing Apple because it's the one and only way. Yeah, I don't know where that'll go. I mean, Apple's got a lot of money to spend on lawyers, but I think that's, when you have a customer that doesn't like the way you're selling, you just have to kind of accept that to a certain degree. And because it doesn't do me any good to try to make everyone happy, again, to Max's point, I have to select my customers and try to make my living that way. And there's always going to be another app doing exactly what my app does and giving it away for free, or selling it for a one-time price, and that is an option you can take. I can't give everybody, as a business, I can't give everyone what they want.
Yeah, to a couple of your points, I think if you're getting frustrated that you want to use a product once and they want it to be paid on subscription, maybe they shouldn't be doing subscriptions. It could be a problem with the business model there. Or if you want to try it before you buy it, they should probably give you the option to try it before you buy it. And then on costs associated with the subscriptions, it's great that they've dropped it, but the real value we're hearing out of people, well, the biggest value people are getting out of the Mac App Store from what we've heard, and it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on this, is the discovery piece. And obviously, that doesn't align very well with subscriptions in that, sure, they may get you that initial customer, but then to charge you 15% for every single payment for the next X amount of time doesn't really align with that. Yeah.
Wanted to add. As a customer, I also hate subscriptions, but that is why we built Setup. Like the customers don't have to make a choice to pay for your app on a subscription basis or not. They make this choice once when they subscribe to the whole App Store. Setup App Store, and then they just have to make a choice like, is this app useful for me? Will I use it or not? And this makes this choice much more easier for everyone, and means that developers can earn money from customers they didn't know their app existed or something like that.
Yeah, so we are a writing app. We have at least 300 competitors, and only 1 or 2 of those are subscription. So if you don't like subscription, go there, please. Yeah, I don't want to force you into my business. And our monthly rate is more than most of our competitors' one-off purchase. So yeah, or they're free. Yeah, half of them is free. So, but if you want the best tool, then that's the way it is. So that is my take on it. Yeah.
What I was wanting to find out from any of you, have you tried posting how much your product is worth? Have you posted how much you think your product is worth? Yes, on your site or out on the App Store. Where that, exactly, what you think your product is worth. Have you posted a dollar value saying, this is how much our product is worth? Because just to give you a little understanding behind this is that I've gone out and field tested my app, and I put it in front of people, all ages, because I want all ages to use it. And of course, what I would do to them, I would say, what do you think it's worth? Of course, you got the Android user. You know what they said.
Yeah, I mean, I could put an infinite there because we are enabling some people to write a book that would never have happened without our app. So right. For them, the personal value is immense, and I can't put it in a number. And if I put any number on my website of what my app is worth, it's probably too high for a lot of people and way too low for a lot of other people.
No, what I'm saying is this, is that when I would go up to someone and I'd say, well, what do you think it's worth? They'd give me a value, and I say, well, I'm thinking about pricing it at this. And they'd be like,
we give you value propositions.
Right.
We give you how we enhance your work. So
right.
This is the way we enhance your business. This is how we enhance whatever you're doing with my app. And then you have to draw your own conclusions if that
right.
is worth the price I put up for
yeah,
it.
What I'm saying is that I would go and say, my app is worth $100,000, and this is why. And when I would say that after they gave me what they thought was worth, they saw the value in it. They saw the value immediately. What they would do is say, oh, you probably did have to spend a lot of money on your app. And when I came back with them with a value that was above 0, they were like, yes, that's a good price. No, it's what I put into it.
Right. The problem is on the App Store in particular that you did this in a person-to-person conversation. I think I can talk to any one of my customers and they don't want to look at me in the face and say my app's worthless to them, right? So, but on the App Store, that's exactly what's happening. They're searching for an app, they're getting a list, and they're seeing that most of them are free, and then they're seeing mine and they're wondering why the heck is this one? And a lot of them will download it just to write that 1-star review and tell me it's not worth anything. And so it's less personable. You don't get that person-to-person touch like sales. It used to be a more personal thing, and with the App Store, it is tricky in that regard.
So just based on that, I think you've got a good point in that I think when you're presenting your app to the world or whatever it is you're doing to the world, I think it's really important for them to understand how much effort you've put in. We never do that with dollar values. We don't tell people how much money we've spent on something. We'll certainly tell people how long we've spent on something, how much effort's gone into it, and definitely the big thing is to try and get them to see the value. But I agree that I think in terms of marketing and which does relate to pricing and subscriptions and all the rest of it, I think it's really important to tell a story, right? And that way you've got something when you're talking to people at a conference, which I think is a good thing to do, and talking to people in the press, that they want there to be a story behind the whole app. So I think, if you can say, if you said, look, I put my life savings into this, I've spent years on it, then it becomes more of an emotional story attached to a human. I think that's a good thing. So. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for in India especially. There was one more question over here, I believe. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I have a question about deciding what's the right price for your app and the process around it. And also, how do you test, especially with limitations on the App Store? And I think also one another angle would be, how do you do it when you use some third-party API, which is charging you based on usage, like someone mentioned?
Okay.
Before.
So, anybody here, pricing expert?
I guess more broadly, there probably isn't a right price, and you need to think about pricing locally, for example, because people are going to have a different appetite to pay for software in different regions and just more money available to them. So it's quite a complex topic and something you should permanently experiment with, I guess. On usage, I think you also need to think about whether that billing model is also going to work globally, and that's a common way to sell software in some regions, but not everywhere. So as much as people, I think, look for this ideal price that's going to work everywhere and convert everyone and we're all going to be super successful, I think this is actually a very, very iterative process, and you should be measuring your things like conversion rates on a normally by geo basis, and also maybe if you've got more than one type of buyer. I think we talked a little bit about buyer personas today. Look at the different value they're getting, their appetite to pay based on the value they're getting, and actually, this is a real thing to experiment with and work at over a long time, and the work's never really finished, which is a pretty horrible answer, but probably the truth.
Yeah, we got time for just one more quick question, and then we're going to have to hand the room off to the next folks. So, yeah.
Hi. For a subscription-based app that has, say, a yearly subscription, what are your thoughts on having a quote-unquote lifetime unlock button in your app to, like, say, 2-3 years or so of the yearly subscription? Thank you.
I can tell you from my experience, whenever I see that lifetime unlock, I immediately don't buy the app either way, because I get so up. I'm like, am I going to use it for 3 years or not? Am I not going to? Every time I see that lifetime unlock, I'm so torn between which one is going to be ready. Like, on the one hand, I can pay only $2 for the next 6 months, and then maybe I'll hate this app and stop using it. On the other hand, if I've paid that $2 once, now that lifetime unlock, I paid $2 more than I needed to. It becomes very like this mathematical equation in my head that doesn't make me happy, and then I usually just go to another app. But
yeah, speaking of that, this pricing, this lifetime value, they usually put like some ridiculous number basically to make you buy subscription more, make you more biased. If you like pay here like $300 and you can pay $10 per month, you'll go there. So this is just for psychological, like to scare you with this big number so that you can go and buy more, convert on subscription. That's how they do it.
Sometimes it's cash flows as well. I think we see indies often start to move to subscriptions and maintain the lifetime sale for a very high price because they benefit from getting a lot of money very quickly, which they can reinvest in building their app. And in reality, after selling subscriptions and this lifetime package for 2 or 3 years, nearly everyone drops the lifetime one eventually when they and their users get comfortable with subscriptions, and they've got that recurring revenue and they start to model their business, and a lot of people drop it after a period of time.
Sorry, I was going to say, we've been very nuanced today, and we've been not very definitive in answers, but there is one thing I would not ever do, and that's have a lifetime unlock. Just because that's a commitment forever, and if your business is, if you're planning on your business being around for a long time, there is no end to that. You have to maintain and service that app forever, and yeah, that's one thing I never.
Thank you, everyone. I have to give the room up, but I do want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank my panel here for being here. I hope you all enjoyed that. You can clap for them, yes. And yeah, so thanks everybody, and enjoy the rest of your week. And I'm sure people here would love to have more questions. If you want to talk with us, feel free.